We're human, don't you know? Just like you are. I'm Rachel Woods, HRBP turned HR coach, and in this series, I explore the technicolor spectrum that is life in HR with folk in the know. Those that have been there, bought the t-shirt, and are happy to share their experiences for us all to benefit. So grab a cuppa, get comfortable, and we will crack on. I'm delighted to welcome today Kelly Tucker. And Kelly says that HR has a bad reputation because HR is the department you bring in when you need to hire, right? Or fire, and the team who deals with the contracts, the compliance, who ensure that the company's playing by the rules. HR are the people who come in and clean up the mess, chase you for boring paperwork, and conduct those dreaded performance reviews. But that isn't really what HR is it? Ellie doesn't think so. And that's exactly what we're going to discuss today. After a big We're Human welcome to you, Ellie. Hello.
Hi, Rachel.
I'm glad. I hope I did you justice there. So I'm shamelessly stealing from LinkedIn.
No, absolutely. That in a nutshell is me.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Glad to hear that. Before we get into it, I'm asking all my guests what actually brought them to the wonderful, hopefully not lame world of HR in the first place. How did you get here? How did you get to it?
So probably as many, like by accident. So I've been working previously as a PA for a large manufacturing company, and took voluntary redundancy because I wanted some time out. I think I was 21, 22 at the time, did a bit of traveling. Anyway, came back from that. I was like, really need a job. So I signed with a recruitment agency, and they were like, we've got this 6-month temp role as a HR administrator for a local charity. And I knew the charity because it was really close to where I lived, but it was a big charity and they had various sites across the UK. And I was like, okay, why not? Like, you need to earn a bit of money, I'll go along. So literally, like I said, it was supposed to be for 6 months, and it was back in the day when HR was called personnel. Nice. And it was also when nothing was in the cloud or electronics. So one of my first jobs was going through the filing cabinets, and it was back when everyone had an actual paper file, their personnel file, and had a copy of their contract and their job description and any letters, and it was going through making sure everybody, and we looked after 200 employees across the UK, everybody had a personnel file. And then we sort of progressed from that on to looking at creating a handbook to sort of lay out what all the policies and procedures were. And again, back then it was statutory, it was what you had to put in these policies, and no one really kind of deviated from that. And then I started looking after recruitment. So they did a lot of recruitment, and again, it was back when it was all very paper-based, so it was writing job ads, putting them in local newspapers, etc., and then sort of sending out application packs when they came back, going through them, sending them off to the hiring manager, setting up interviews, etc. So it was supposed to be for a 6-month contract, and I ended up staying there 8 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So I progressed whilst I was there up to sort of HR officer. Well, they changed it whilst I was from personnel to HR, and then to HR manager. And it was when I left there to have my first son that I decided I needed to make a change. A lot of people worked there, you know, they were lifers back when people used to have a job for life. And I thought, if I go back, I will end up staying there forever. And I wanted to do something different. So then I went and got a role for a medical market research company, privately owned, and they didn't have a HR department, about 50 employees. So again, I went in and I set up the HR department, and I stayed there for about 7.5 years. And it was from there that I then set up HR Star, and they actually became my first client.
Oh, wow. Okay, gosh, that's, yeah. And as you started talking, like, I sort of fell into it. I know you're talking about my life now. It's like, it's something, I was a PA, I became an office manager. I took on HR as a side role, if you like. It was one of my other job titles that just took over everything. And then that was it. I was hooked. I was there right until I wasn't. Yeah, it's amazing how many people do sort of trip up and fall into HR as opposed to plan it as a career. I think my lovely little Jack Russell's discovered there's a squirrel in the garden, so I'm just going to shut the door, and I won't edit this out because, you know, this is life, right? So we'll keep going and exit Loki from the room. Thank you very much. Off you go. Thank you.
The joys now of working from home.
Oh, the perils of working from home, right? So yes. Would-be Jack Russells who are paranoid about, I don't know, some sort of malignant squirrel in the garden that they don't they think has ulterior motives, I think. So I was talking about kind of HR being this lame duck. It's quite a sweeping statement. Where's that come from?
It is, but I do believe it to be true. I mean, I do think HR's reputation is changing, and I think the pandemic has helped with that. But sort of pre that, I think, you've probably seen it as well, Rachel, or well, from your time when you worked in HR. HR is the department that's seen as, you wheel out HR when you want to hire and fire, or if somebody's like needs discipline in all HR. And I'm sure, as I say, you've experienced, HR walking around, oh my God, HR's here, oh my God, somebody's obviously in trouble. Like
HR's in the room.
yeah, and
watch what you say.
it also referred to as HR rather than your actual name. Like,
oh no, you don't have a name.
Do you have a name? And so I think it stems from that. And I think for me, like I said, I think the reputation is changing in terms of the pandemic really sort of highlighted the need for good HR in businesses when we obviously looked, how do we furlough people? What if we think there is a perception that it is this function that's there to support in terms of, like I say, you need it when you need it. Whereas I truly believe like you always need HR within a business. People are your most important assets. Most businesses couldn't function without their people. So why would you not invest time and resource into those people to ensure that they're really engaged? Because if they're really engaged, they're more productive and they're more motivated and they're happier, and you have less of those horrible things to deal with, like high absence, high levels of sickness, poor in that integral role and really do these proactive things. But not everybody is on the same page. So I do still think there is this laying reputation, which I know it's obviously, like I say, quite a sweeping statement, but I think it has to change. I do think people need to understand it isn't fluffy.
We're cutting out a little bit there, Kelly. I might be able to edit around that, but I think you're right. We were talking around where the reputation's coming from and that need to shift it. And like you say, some organizations are doing better than others. Some HR teams are doing better than others, and some are still very much in that transactional space. So yeah, I can think about what's possible is I mean, who do you think's leading the way in that at the moment?
In terms of changing the reputation of HR?
Yeah. Who would you say actually, if I were gonna go back into corporate life and I were to join an in-house HR team again, where would I want to be? Where would I want to go?
I mean, there's obviously like the big players, isn't there? You look at, your Netflix, your Apple, Google, they those big companies who shout about how much they look after their people. But then I do think in terms on a smaller scale, it tends to be entrepreneurial type businesses. So people who are, in fast growing business or are on for fast growth within their business, they are now really seeing or know that their people are the key to making that happen. So I'm really fortunate now that I work with some great clients and they are those types of, and they sort of have their personas of people they want to work with, and it's all about the brand. It's like doing that internally, like with your people. So like sort of fast growing entrepreneurial types, creative types, they're the types of businesses who are like saying to people like me, yes, I want to do this stuff. I understand it's really important, but I also appreciate that I'm not an expert in it. So come and do it for me.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I was thinking you very briefly had a quick chat earlier about the CIPD. Now I bring them up cautiously because I cancelled my membership. I wasn't getting any value from them, and none of the organisations I worked for needed me to be a member. They didn't care. But what role does something like the CIPD have to play in this, or what responsibility should they be taking for this situation? I guess there's two sides to that question.
I think although the CIPD have tried to change over time as well to also come across less stuffy, shall we say, I do think they've still got a way to go. So exactly like you just said, I was able to start my HR career and get all the way to HR manager position without getting my CIPD qualification. It never stopped me. It doesn't stop, it hasn't stopped others that I know as well. But I did go and get my qualification through distance learning after I left my first role, because I thought, right, I'm out in the world of work, is it going to be needed? Maybe probably a bit of reassurance for myself. I've been in one role, progressed up to HR manager, let me go and get that qualification to back up what I've, experience I've had. But like you, in all honesty, it adds no value to me and my role. But I do think there's still probably employers out there who wouldn't bring somebody into their organisation to do HR without the qualification. And I do think that the CIPD has a responsibility then to be more relevant, shall we say, and add more value to their members.
Yeah, and if I think about working in a big corporate, actually, I was in Danone for a really long time, and an awful lot of people joined HR at a senior level from other sort of relatively unrelated departments. So they came in for business development, they came in from I think finance, and ultimately the kind of the leadership level, you didn't need to know all the nuts and bolts of the transactional HR stuff because there was a department, there were people that was their job, and as long as you could support and lead them, you didn't need to know or have done foundation level 3, 5, 7, or CIPP as it was when I did mine. It wasn't or CPP, I think it was. Foundation levels didn't exist at that point because I'm that old. So ultimately, actually, and to them, the CIPD really doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't hold any weight because they're like, well, why would I go and get that when I'm coming in at a very senior level on a very good salary? I've got the title of HR director or HR senior HR business partner. I work in this space. Yes, okay, I don't know all the ins and outs of grievance processes, disciplinary processes, but at the end of the day, they are a process. And this organization has that's in place that can help me with that process, even if I'm the escalation to hear the appeals, final decision maker. Ultimately, I can find all the information I need to follow that process. What extra help what could the CIPD add in really to make themselves current and valuable to people at that level, or consultants like yourself? I mean, ultimately, I don't see a single consultant that really relies on the CIPD for their work, or the fact that they're a member to sell their work even.
Absolutely. So if I just think back to when I did my CIPD through the distance learning route, I still had to then do the assignments and then go and do the exams. And so much of it was based on the theory behind all of the different areas of HR. And even I remember in the exam being a 3-hour exam and having to, and the question was, your MD has come to you asking for your thoughts on an appraisal process, stating in quoting theory, and who does that? Nobody does that. And so I think again, as as a consultant, and I mean, I'm lucky that I do have a good network, but I'm assuming there's consultants out there who are in standalone roles consulting, and maybe the CIPD could be more of a relevant place for them to go to I know there's different CIPD groups, etc., but to be able to share, from what I see on the CIPD and website, and I haven't used the resource for a while, but I have since I've been a consultant, it's all very geared towards if you're an in-house HR practitioner. So I think maybe they need in terms of you can be obviously in a different role in HR but still need that support through the CIPD. I don't know, it's hard for me to comment in that I don't use the resource, so I'm really unfamiliar now with what's on there or even how you do obtain the qualification anymore.
It does, but it speaks volumes, doesn't it, that you are an HR professional and that's not a resource that you draw on or follow through or think about. And I must admit, when I did my first coaching certificate, my PG cert in 2013, so I was very much still in the HR management space at that point. Grew into HR business partner over the years and so on and so forth. But ultimately, I dropped my membership because I was paying for it, not really getting anything from it. So again, I wasn't looking at the website. I wasn't buying the books with the discount because it wasn't a discount, frankly. But ultimately, also for me, there wasn't enough support for the coaching approach. I think the classic example is that question you just gave. What would you tell them to do? What would you? And ultimately, it's actually what I would want to do is have a coaching conversation. What do they want to gain from an appraisal process? What will this deliver for the business? What will this deliver to the individual? How does that marry up? What are you going to use for matching this up to reward? Do you match it up to reward? Do you keep the two separate? Do you combine the two? Because I know that's a big chestnut to kind of think about, whether you actually mix those two things together or not. But ultimately, I would have a more coaching conversation with a manager than I would tell you to do this because the theory says this, and I'm going to quote these great thinkers of the past decade or century. in terms of personnel, that are quoted in my lovely, very hefty book on personnel management. Um, so from that perspective, I think that, yeah, you're right. It's that, where is that currency? And do you think actually that is a bit of the secret of HR going forward? And I've noticed it a lot more. And there's every HR person whose CV I've come across in the last 5 6 years has mentioned that they coach as opposed to tell.
Yeah, I do. I do think so. I think as well because human resources is about humans. So you need to take, I believe, a human approach to that. And like I say, it's not going to, people within the organization and saying, well, the theory on this says this, so you should do this. Every organization is different and people are different, aren't they? And so this is why I believe that you learn better and you're a better HR person through experience, because you can teach somebody, can't you? This is how you run a discipline, or the theory, I know how to run it. Until you're sat in that room doing an investigation meeting or a hearing or appeal, you don't know how that person's going to react to what they're going to say. And the only way you get to be able to handle those situations is by doing lots of them with lots of different people in lots of different situations. Now, I think back to what I learned through studying the CIPD, a fraction of what I've learned from working in HR. But then when I compare to what I learned being a HR manager in-house, yes, that was lots. But then when I compare it to what I've learned over the last 7.5 years being a consultant, like it's huge in the last 7.5 years, because I deal with so many different types of people in different types of business, of different sizes, with different cultures. And you can't teach somebody that through a textbook or sitting in an exam. Yes, you need to know what the correct procedures, but like I say, you can find that stuff out. But I believe you get good at your job through relationships and through situations that you've had to deal with as a HR professional.
And it's funny, I've got a bit of a there's a bit of a soapbox bee in my bonnet around HR practice, actually any practice that advises and supports and empowers man. It has that influence over other people. And as coaches, and if you talk to therapists and anyone that's in the helping professions, the talking professions, they have supervision, they have support to reflect on their practice to make it better. And one thing I've always reflected on since I learned all about that through coaching, I didn't learn about that through HR, is wow, if I'd known about that in my HR role, each time I did or managed to sort of skate my way through an iffy disciplinary or grievance, or felt like I really cocked something up, or whatever that looked like, or went really well, something that went incredibly well, I had never had the time or took the time to stop and reflect on that practice and go, okay, what went well, what could have been better, and use a thinking partner, whether it's a coach, whether it's a mentor, whatever, use a thinking partner to hone that and be better the next time. Because ultimately, you either did it by osmosis and you kind of did it accidentally, and you got better just because, well, that hurt, I'm not doing that again. So, but I think it's because I have an agenda here. I do have an agenda here, but is there a place for something like coaching supervision for HR?
Yeah, 100%. And it's really, really funny actually. This conversations come up because it's happened this week in my team. So just got one of my people advisors back from maternity leave, and she's now looking after some new clients for me. And one of the things that we've been doing is check-ins with the team. So we do that because it's a small business and our client loves us to do it because we have a relationship with the team and we get something different out of them to be able to then sort of shape like the people strategy and feedback different thoughts, not directly to the business owner. Anyway, so Kaz and my team was doing the one like the check-ins, and she was like, oh, can you sit in with me? And I was like, sure. So she was leading, but I was sort of contributing throughout that. And then what we did at the end of that was I gave her feedback. Well, I asked for her what her reflections were, then I gave her feedback and I said, so this is like why I asked this question, and this is why I approached this, or why I said this. So we did coaching afterwards and that reflective conversation, and she just said, well, this is brilliant because I feel like I'm getting that in the moment feedback and ability to talk this stuff through, which she will then take to those next check-ins, and she will do things slightly different. So I think definitely there's massive, and like you were just saying, I think when I was like learning, that would have been so beneficial to have somebody after an event, like say holding like your first disciplinary or a tricky one, or doing a dismissal meeting that obviously when you first do your first few, it's not a pleasant experience, to be able to say out as right, let's talk about how we think that went, or how we could potentially like change it up next time. Yeah, so that, I think, more so than just knowing like what the theory is or what the process is, it's human, isn't it? And I think you have to take a human approach to it.
Exactly. It's, I mean, ultimately, I always used to say there was nothing you couldn't Google when it came to HR, except the customer practice of your organization.
Yeah.
Okay, you'd say ACAS would say this, the process would say this, the law would say this. Yeah, but we've been pretty lenient on that stuff before. So why would we suddenly go hard on this individual? Or because somebody doesn't like them? Well, no. So that's the magic of an HR team. They know the organization, they know the customer practice, they know the history of things, and they help the organization not trip over their own feet by suddenly shifting their customer practice. And that used to really scare me. When somebody new came in or I was leaving, I'm like, there's so much in my head that's been customer practice over the years. What's going to happen when I'm gone? What's going to happen when that if nobody else knows this? And it's keeping that kind of legacy habit, beliefs and culture kind of alive, to say, this is how this stuff is done here.
Yes.
You may have come from there where it was very black and white, what we call hard ass HR, which is very this or this, and my way or the highway. Actually, I was very lucky. I think Nutricia Danone had a very lovely, little bit soft in some ways, but at the same time very supportive and coercive and collaborative way of working with people insofar as they possibly could. Even their exit conversations, if they happened, obviously we can't talk about them, were done with a huge amount of support and generosity, and actually that I couldn't fault them in that front and on that front at all. And yes, okay, it was a very comfortable place for a lot of people to be, and people therefore didn't always move on when maybe they were fed up, and they should have, to do something different, because it was a bit of a gilded cage in some ways. And I fell into that. I must admit, I absolutely fell into that. I probably should have left about 2 years before I actually did. I had the opportunity, thankfully, after 2 years to be made redundant, and I went, yay, because that set me up for setting my own business up. But ultimately, it was a very comfortable car, and the salary was lovely, and the people were amazing, and then there was an organization. It was so lovely and friendly and comfortable. You didn't want to leave, even though you kind of weren't in love with the job anymore. I'd fallen out of love with HR. This wasn't just about the organization. It's just I'd actually fallen out of love. I'd become a bit bored with, how like every day is different.
Yeah.
Well, every day was different, but then I kept seeing the same themes coming around.
But you know what? And that's why I wanted to meet. That's one of the reasons I wanted to move out of in-house HR. And I suppose one of the great things about my role, because now as a consultant, that doesn't tend to happen. And if it did with a client, if I kept saying like, we need to do this, and it just kept going round in circles, that's the point I'd say, okay, right, well, we've done all we can do now. So, thank you very much. And we
next.
Because and I do think, and it's controversial. I talk about LinkedIn and people go crazy about it, but I do think there's massive benefits of outsourcing your HR function for that reason, because when you're in house, you become one of the people, and you do lose objectivity because you're one of them. Like, how can you objectively talk about salary structures that's going to affect you, or about bonuses that affects you, the appraisal process that affects you? Whereas it doesn't affect me. I'm not one of the employees.
You're not doing your own salary. I used to do the salary reviews every year. I did the salary reviews and the bonus calculations for the UK and Ireland, and I was on the list. And I used to feel really icky, even if I deserved something more because I was low in the pay band and I didn't want to give it to myself because I worried what others would think. Thank God, actually, one thing I did realize really, really kind of too late, really, it was about 2 years before I actually left, was it metaphorically get into bed with the finance team. Have a finance partner while you are working on this stuff to keep each other in check. And he was amazing. He was like, actually, you deserve that. That's, we've pulled this algorithm together. That's what the algorithm's saying. That's fairly what you get. And if it was more than I was expecting, I'd be like, oh, that's lovely. But I'd still feel icky about it.
Of course.
Because, I would love to have just gone, I'm going to outsource that to somebody else that isn't on the list of people getting, because that just felt so weird. But you're right. I think that's I think keep your transactional stuff in house, your consultancy stuff outside. Because that's such a clean way of doing things. It's such a doing things. It doesn't mean there's less jobs for HR people. Arguably, there's more.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it. There's, I think every business needs HR. There's definitely enough work to go round,
God,
but
yeah,
I
God,
do
yeah.
think there's certain functions, within HR that are best suited to external consultants. Another, like say, that transaction data stuff. Yeah, great. Have an in-house team doing that stuff. They're there every day. They get to know the processes for that organization inside out. So definitely a role for both in-house and
Yeah.
outsourcing. But I think it's knowing which roles to allocate to each of those.
Yeah, and also then you've got someone to do HR for your HR team, because otherwise they're
Yeah,
doing it themselves, and that's just like cobbler's children. Because let's face it, we all leave ourselves till last.
yeah,
So
exactly.
many
Like,
HR teams have tiny budgets. They don't spend on L&D. They don't have coaching, and yet all the board have got coaches, and everyone else, leaders of the
yeah,
teams. Yeah, we've got this big organization coming in, charging thousands of pounds per hour to do coaching with them. It shouldn't cost that much, frankly. But ultimately, that's what happens. And
yeah,
actually, the HR team go, well, we could actually really do with something like that. That would be really helpful, particularly when we have difficult ER cases and complex things. I mean, we get a horrible case where somebody pulled the wool over our eyes for years, and it impacted at an emotional level right the way through the organization, and it was horribly uncomfortable.
mm,
And actually coaching at that point would have been
yeah,
immensely helpful for all of us.
mm-hmm.
Budget for it, because we didn't
Definitely.
look after ourselves like that. We didn't
Mm,
ask. We could have had the budget for it, we didn't
no,
ask. I think, well,
no,
that's on us, but I
yeah.
see that in so many HR teams. Like, you are the cobbler's children, you've got crappy shoes because you don't ask for new ones.
No, it's so true. And I also think, as well, when you think about like MDs or, the senior leadership team, it's hard, isn't it? But if I just think about the relationship I have with like the MDs I work with, and that tends to be like what my role focuses on, and that's strategic, but it's a really supportive role to the MD, and they feel so comfortable talking to me about that stuff because I'm not within the business. And where I do work with in-house HR teams, the HR manager does not have the same relationship with the MD because it's hard for them to offload, I think, sometimes to somebody who's within that organization, where it feels safer, I suppose, to talk to somebody who they're not employing.
They're external, but also you're contractually obliged to be confidential. And yes,
Yeah,
again, in-house HR teams are also contractually
of
obliged to be,
course.
but it feels that kind of
Mm,
slightly nepotistic. It's not nepotistic, but it just feels a bit icky to kind of, expose that sort of stuff, and also think about the future of the organization and mention things that are worrying you about the future of the organization that you don't want to spill to the populace. You don't want to get the lower, because you haven't made that decision yet, you're just mulling it over, but you would worry them by sharing it with them at that point. You may not actually do it, but by sharing it with
exactly.
somebody external, like you say, who has no agenda, who's like, whatever you do, you do,
Yeah.
help you navigate your way through the change or help your people,
Mm,
whatever that looks like. But you're not going to be impacted by it. Therefore, that emotional kind of, their worry about upsetting you isn't there.
mm. Oh, absolutely not. No.
That safe space. It makes a massive difference. It does. It really, really does.
Mm,
So,
mm.
does HR need a revolution? Is it
I
overdue?
think so. I think maybe it started. Like I said, I do think the pandemic massively one kind of shone the spotlight on HR and what they actually do. I mean, I know I've worked in HR for years, and there's still members of my family who don't really know what I do, and definitely don't know what I do now that I do it differently. Um, but I do think that has helped. But then I think coming out of it, what we've seen is obviously lots of businesses rebounding quickly and really successfully. So all of a sudden, oh my God, I need some good people. People's expectation changed because obviously they got used to working from home, or they had a kind of pause, let me reevaluate what I want from my life. And I got off the hamster wheel, and I don't really want to get back on in the same way. So now I'm going to go to my employer and say, but actually, I want X, Y, Z. And then you throw in the great resignation and quiet quitting and quiet fire and all the other like buzzwords. But basically, the fact that there was all,
Reinventing old things, let's face it, they've always
yeah,
been around. They've just
yeah,
not been called that.
exactly. But I think what's happened is then there was obviously loads of jobs out there, not enough people. So then the fight for talent became obviously huge,
It's a
and
war, don't you know?
employers
It's a war for
a
talent.
war for talent, war.
Don't forget that.
And then obviously employers had to sit there and think, right, I need to hire, and their expectations have changed. So I'm going to have to look at, like, because one of the first questions now a candidate's going to ask me, or at least at some point in the process, is, what benefits do you offer? Do you do hybrid working? Do you invest in developing me if I work for you? All of those things that used to be fluffy now have been absolutely essential to find great people or hold on to your people. So it has started, I think, that change, but there's still a long way to go. Definitely still a long way to go.
Yeah, yeah, and it is funny, isn't it? It's and you do see organisations that are actually getting that absolutely right. You still get those that are like, well, let's just give them some free fruit, they'll be fine.
Yeah.
An EAP, free fruit and an EAP. That's all you need to do for well-being, and extra perks. You know, oh, let them work one day at home every now and then.
Oh, I know. Yeah, we offer loads of benefits, but do you actually ask your people if it benefits them? Because there's only a benefit if they benefit from it. So
Yeah.
what you think is a benefit, it might not be a benefit to your people.
This is it. It's just like, well, I like it. I was like, well,
Yeah.
cycle to work scheme, great, but know, you're
Nobody
in
cycles to work.
half your team are in rural Somerset, so
Yeah.
they was going to cycle to Bristol from Somerset. That's not going to happen, is it?
Exactly.
Well, they're all working from home now. Where are they going to cycle to? Round the block and back again.
Yeah.
Oh, it does make me laugh a little bit.
Mm.
But you're right, I think, and where you see the flexible benefits where people can buy in or sell things like buy and sell holiday, and have childcare vouchers and those things, I think, again, fairly not new, but within the last 10 years have become a lot commonplace. So they're still not massively commonplace.
No, they're still
I mean,
not.
even salary sacrifice. I mean, my husband's changed jobs a couple of times in the last 2 years. And every time he signs up for a new pension, like, are they going to sell sacrifice that? He's like, no, they've never heard of it.
No, I know.
It's just so many, you can save on tax. Well, you don't save so much because you get that back, but you save on national insurance. They can other things that they could offer you and have not cost them anything to offer, really.
But I think that's it, though, isn't it?
But,
employees don't realise that it actually doesn't cost them, or it costs them very little. Even implementing an EAP, an employee assistance program, it doesn't cost a lot of money for one that offers
$3.90 a head or something, aren't you? It's tiny.
Then they think it's going to cost them a lot of money, so they just don't even bother looking at it. I was like, do you know it won't? And the value that would add in terms of your, like, financially would help your people, but they would feel like, oh wow, this is a really great employer because they're trying to look after me, they value me, they want to help me out, especially obviously at the moment, the cost of living crisis. The benefits would far outweigh that small cost of doing it.
Exactly. So it sends that message. Your employer gives the stuff about how you feel at work. And that's half the battle, isn't it? And then in the war for talent, it's like keeping people engaged is half the battle. Is let them know you give a shit about them. Because if they feel like you don't and they're instantly replaceable, they're not going to feel safe. They're not going to feel engaged with you. They're not going to feel loyal because they're like, well, you'll just replace me if I fall over. What's going to make them stay other than that feeling of actually they really do care about me? So yeah, of course I'm going to give them some loyalty. It just seems like such a obvious common sense.
Doesn't it though? Doesn't it? When I sit there still now and talk to business leaders, and I say what we do and why, and like, oh wow, yeah, that's interesting. I'm like, surely it's just common sense. Surely it's pretty obvious.
Oh, that is not new. It's been around for years. It's like, where have you been? It's suddenly, oh my God, that's amazing. I'm like, no, that's actually quite common nowadays. So you've been under a rock somewhere.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah, I get it. Yeah, and if I share sort of with clients, potential clients, the impact we've had with our clients, and it impacts like that bottom line, and I show that because they've got an engaged team and the engagements like increased by X amount, I show them what that's done in terms of reduced turnover, reduced absence, reduced performance issues, and therefore increase like the bottom line. They're like, oh wow, like like of course that's going to relate to that, of course.
Anyway, you give them the real cost of recruitment and replacing someone, and like, oh, somebody's asked for like a 2% pay rise on top of what you've already given them because they're out of kilter with the market. No. Oh, no. Well, they'll leave. You'll lose them. Okay, well, let them go. Oh, it's only going to cost you 3 times their salary to replace them, and the person that comes in, you're probably going to have to pay more because they're going to be expecting market rate. You've just lost that talent. You've just lost that knowledge, that implicit, and also you don't have an advocate now. You've somebody off. They're not going to advocate for your business.
And nobody walks into an organization, regardless however skilled and experienced they are, being able to fully hit the ground running. Like I've just started working with a client, and I'm doing a HRD role for them a couple of days a week. So I've all the experience and knowledge to be able to do that role, but it's taken me a month to really understand like how their processes work, like who the people are, what the structures are. I'm adding value, but nowhere near the amount of value I can add, because for the first month, 6 weeks, I'm having to like embed myself into the organization.
You're getting to know them, they're getting to know you, getting to trust you, open up to you, because let's face it, don't straight away. It's all very sunshine and roses right now, and then you're in 2 or 3 weeks and they're like, oh, actually, can I have a word with you about this?
Yeah.
Suddenly you get the stories coming out like, okay, now I'm getting a fuller picture.
Yeah.
Now you happen to be sitting in the ladies and you overhear a conversation, like now I'm understanding the culture much better, much.
So you're not going to have you're not going to add the true like value that you can add straight away. So that's also what you lose by if you let good people go. They're taking that knowledge and experience of working in your business with them, and then that's going to take time to build back up. So you lose so much by letting good people go.
And let's face it, quite often it's ego driven, isn't it? It's how dare you? It's like, how dare you? Oh, I'm not going to back down. I'll never back down for the sake of another £1,000 a year. Come on. God. So depending on the level, it can be pennies. I mean, depending on the level of organization, it can be a tiny amount of money, in the grand scheme of things. But it's the principle of it. Like,
most people, let's be honest, most people aren't going up to their line manager and going, give me a 10 grand like pay rise.
No,
and if
they want
they're probably deluded or they're significantly underpaid. But most people are asking for a reasonable amount
to cover their bills.
Yeah. Talk to your people, find out why they're asking for what they're doing. Like, let's be humans and adults and have a conversation about it.
Let's try and understand, use our curiosity, what we were with when we were born. Oh, I love it. We could talk about this today.
Oh, God.
So I suppose we did close up really a bit, but any advice for future entrants to HR as a profession, whether they're tripping up and falling into it like you and I did, whether they're coming from a different function and into a more leadership level at HR, or whether they're in university or college right now or at the end of their kind of school years and going, I really think HR is the profession for me. What would you tell them?
Don't do it. No, joke.
I was waiting for that. No one's been brave enough to say it yet, so I'm glad you did.
No, I do love what I do. I think it's about being really open to learning. Like for me, I still learn every day because obviously different like things come up. Like you're never going to know it all, and I think it's about relationships because you're going to get the best out of people when there's trust, and HR there needs to be that trust. So like never go in all guns blazing. I think it's such a fulfilling career and it's a great career, but you just have to understand that there's always going to be lots to learn. People are unpredictable, so you always expect the unexpected. But I think it's about just like I know you said it's human. Like be a human. And just try and experience as many different things as possible. Like if someone says to you, do you want to sit in and shadow like this disciplinary, or sit in and watch this exit interview, do it, because that's the way you're going to learn. Like you can do all the theory and read the textbooks, but the hands-on experience will teach you so much more. So whatever opportunity is presented for you to get that hands-on experience, like take it.
Yeah, and I love that. And actually, I think you're right. It's that seizing those opportunities. I mean, things like free mock tribunals, that kind of thing. And we used to love those. They were always free because it was local legal firms wanted your business that were running them. They always had nice coffee and biscuits. So that was always worth going to. And it was interesting. You got to see they were real cases way back or something that they were rehashing, and they would ask you questions on the way through, like, what went wrong in the investigation here, and like, what would you do differently? And absolutely amazing. And you'd sit there going, God, I hope I never get that scenario. Of course, you never did. You get one that was worse, maybe, but you wouldn't get that one. But ultimately, just a fascinating thing to get involved with. And like you say, it's in the organization. Find a mentor, find someone that you can shadow and learn from.
Definitely.
Amazing. I miss it in some ways. I must admit, I do miss it in some ways, and that's why I came back to my business mentor said, why are you avoiding working with HR? I was like, well, because every time I mentioned I used to be HR, I used to get, well, can you come and do some policies for us? Like, no, I don't do that anymore. So I gave it a year and a half and went, right, now I can go back and start talking to HR people because I won't be dragged into writing.
This is where I think I'm really lucky, because I've obviously done, that stuff in the past, like the policy writing and that transactional side. And obviously, like, there's a place for it, and it's a great learning platform. But now I love the fact that my role predominantly is talking to like business leaders about like mapping out their people strategies and what they want to achieve and how. And I spend my time talking like to really interesting people about this stuff, and that's what I absolutely love.
Yeah, that's really brilliant. You get to do the bits of it. The bits of HR that you love. Yeah.
If you have
It
to
is,
love
isn't it?
talking to people.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And
So
like you
when
say,
said
it's
to you, if an employee on the way out saying I'll see you in court, my response is see you there, because 99% will not end up in court. So never be scared by that.
no, exactly. It's because very rarely does it go there, does it? So very finally, the shameless plug. You get to do one of these. So how can folk find you, with you, if they want to find out more or just follow you? Where will you be found hanging out?
So I am very active on LinkedIn. So I'm very outspoken. So I don't sugarcoat anything. I am, and it's not PC always in terms of like I will add the odd swear word in there. But yeah, do believe in being honest and open, and that's me. So I'm on LinkedIn. So Kelly Tucker on LinkedIn, but also HR Star has a page and we have a website, so www.hr-star.co.uk, and there's like everything on there that what we do. So if anyone wants to, I'm happy to chat. I love chatting. So if anybody wants to drop me a message, either LinkedIn or via the website, then always happy to chat about anything people and HR related.
Fabulous. I'm glad you're happy to chat. It's so much easier for a podcast when you are. I guess it's really quiet. It's monosyllabic. I haven't had one yet, but I'm sure my future, there might be one in the future. Who knows? Kelly's LinkedIn and social contacts will all be in the show notes. So if you missed any of that or didn't write it down, that's fine. Thank you so much, Kelly, for coming and talking. This has been an absolute joy. If you like this, do subscribe. I'm sure on whatever platform you listen to, there's a little bell or a button you can click. There definitely is on my website, and you will get notified when new episodes appear. I'm going to move to fortnightly, so they will be coming out every 2 weeks. Yay. Thank you, Kelly. This is great.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.